Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for another edition, Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. On the hazardous weather graphics, we've got no watches, no warnings, and no advisories out anywhere in the state today for a change, and so that usually indicates pretty quiet conditions in most areas. Otherwise, looking at the satellite loop here, you can see a low pressure area tracking up across the Queen Charlotte's and into Dixon Entrance there, and then really washing out here as it gets into the southern panhandle. Most of the heavy weather was down from Dixon Entrance, where Lucy Island had wind gusts to 54 miles per hour. And let's see, Cape St. James on the south end of the Queen Charlotte's, they had gusts to 84 miles per hour. And half an inch of rain falling in places of Norton Sound, but AKwx only picking up a measly 0.05 of an inch and not much in the way of any winds. Still getting the channeled outflow winds of about 40 to 50 miles an hour over the channeled areas of the central and northern southeast coast. That same thing going on to a certain extent here for the North Gulf Coast as well in Prince William Sound. 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts observed at Seward, Whittier, and Potato Point, with 45-mile-an-hour wind gusts in Keystone Canyon, and probably stronger gusts coming out of the Copper River Delta. You can see enough of a gradient here to produce those winds, keeping it cleared out in the windy areas. Low clouds, fog really persisting. Northern Cook Inlet on up into the Matanuska Valley, really south of Palmer today. Visibility is gradually improving throughout the afternoon. As I mentioned, the advisory ended in an hour from now, about 4 p.m. Otherwise, up here to the north, a widespread area of clouds with flurries and fog. Real light conditions, really no significant accumulations of snow at all the way down from the eastern Arctic coast, across the Eastern Brooks Range Arctic Village into the upper Yukon Valley, Battles included, on down to well, actually the Fairbanks area eastward into Token Northway, and otherwise break here through the interior and southern Alaska, Kodiak Island, mostly clear except on the south coast. Some clouds starting to increase there around AKwx, but otherwise a nice day in that area. Same thing for the North Gulf Coast, and a few snow showers around Unalaska today. Otherwise the Alaska Peninsula dry, Pribilof's dry, and some rain and snow associated with the storm force winds out here. Shimmy has seen gusts to 71 miles per hour before the front went through. They've been diminishing since, and this whole system's weakening. Gusts about 40 miles an hour currently at AKwx with rain moving into the area there, but those winds will not be as strong as they were back out to the west with a whole front weakening. Looking at tonight's forecast, no change here over southern Alaska, and really not much change over all of interior Alaska from the Arctic coast on down here. Maybe a little bit of a diminishing in the winds and those channeled winds, and that's about it. Winds should start to increase here over the Aleutians with increasing chances of precipitation of this big storm down to the south starting to edge northward there. Otherwise, kind of an unsettled pattern here for the southeast coast. That low pressure area tracks off to the east, but southwest flow bringing a lot of moisture in, but nothing heavy. From about the central areas on down, and it'll be in the form of rain or snow or a mixture depending on your elevation and latitude. Otherwise, in the Gulf of Alaska, real weak low, snow showers or shower conditions developing around that, but really staying off the coast. Again, Kodiak Island a little more vulnerable, but whatever falls will be negligible. And then for tomorrow, we'll see that moisture shifts up, or it stays really with that southerly flow here, weak low in the Gulf, and a couple of weak troughs. Everything's weak, and that are going to result in light precipitation in the form of rain or snow or showers. Definitely cloudy skies, chance of snow up in the northern areas with mostly cloudy skies, increasing chances for rain or rain and snow showers from Yakutat to Cordova. Valdez stays dry with breezy northeast winds. Southern Alaska stays dry, and a trough up here keeps chance of light, or an area of light snow with low clouds, patchy fog. Koyukuk Valley back out to the western central Arctic coast, and out in the Aleutians, big increase in winds. That should be good for gusts 40 to 60 miles an hour out of the east here, but lighter way out there to the west. Front edging northward here. Rain increases or precipitation increasing. Will be trending toward rain here for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians. A band starting to build here southeast of Kodiak, but through most of the day it should be dry. Dry for Cook Inlet, hopefully losing the low clouds and fog. And then for Monday, looking like this, better chance, southerly flow increasing aloft. That's going to start the beginning of a warming trend, especially late in the day, but it won't really show up temperature-wise until Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Rain and snow right along the coast, mixture, rain, Kodiak Island, warming temperatures, increasing moisture, Bristol Bay, breezy and wet for the central Aleutians. And the next storm here, pushing northward, that'll bring more strong winds into the Queen Charlottes, and that'll start to increase the winds depending on exactly where this thing tracks. That'll depend how strong the winds get there over the southern panhandle areas, but looks like a good shot of rain coming up from the south there. So call it moderate to possibly heavy rain developing there late in the day and for Monday evening. Otherwise, chances of rain and snow all the way up to White Pass, and a chance of rain right along the North Gulf Coast, or mixed rain and snow with whatever snow, not getting too far inland to the Copper River Basin. Maybe the Talkeetna is picking up some light snow shower activity. Southern Kenai Peninsula, of course the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range on out to the southwest. Interior, look for a little bit of an increase in the winds, tightening gradient here, just flurries eastern Arctic coast. Lows for tonight, anywhere from 25 to 40 below over the eastern northern interior, depending on where you clear out. If you're going to hit 40 below, you're definitely going to have the skies clear. Anyway, Copper River Basin down into the 15 to 20 below range, and 5 to 15 below for the Susitna Valley, like Willow, Butte, and those areas. And otherwise, single numbers here for the Kenai Peninsula, and ranging from 20 over the northern southeast coast to mid-30s down to the south, and lower 30s for the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow, 15 to 25 below up in the northeast, milder for the Arctic coast, and staying below zero for Copper River Basin. Highs in the lower to mid-teens here for northern Cook Inlet, Madawaska, Susitna Valley. Single numbers to near zero at Bethel, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, upper 30s in the Aleutians. And then for the highs the following day, lows Monday morning, 30s, 20s for the Panhandle, below zero again. Not quite as far here south of the Alaska Range, but definitely staying below zero to the north, well below, anywhere from 20 to 35 below. Highs starting to edge upward a little bit, but that won't occur until the following day. Look for mid to upper teens here, south central Alaska, staying below zero north of the Alaska Range out to the Arctic coast, upper 30s to mid 40s for the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Got some marginal VFR here from the eastern Alaska Range, actually through the central interior, the IFR up over toward the east. Another patch up there, Brooks Range on out to the, looks like the Wainwright area. Marginal VFR into the northern Seward Peninsula. Good VFR here, Bristol Bay, just east of the Pribilofs there. Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak. VFR right into Copper River Basin. And then for Sunday afternoon, marginal here for the Alaska Peninsula, all the way out probably to the Komodorskis. VFR now for the Pribilofs, right up to the southwest coast, across the southern interior. Maybe some marginal VFR making it this far up tomorrow afternoon. But Kodiak Island, pretty good. Sitkinak, though, getting a little vulnerable to lower conditions. Marginal VFR over the north. And a band of narrow IFR there, right along the eastern border of the Panhandle. That expands there on Monday morning with marginal conditions out along the outer coastline. Definitely marginal VFR now working up across all the Copper River Basin to the Talkeetnas, Prince William Sound, southern Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak, IFR, Alaska Peninsula, a little bit over the northern Bering, but not much, and some areas of marginal VFR over the northern interior, but the North Slope and central eastern Arctic coast looking pretty good. And still marginal for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Outlook for Monday, no change out that way. This area of IFR kind of expands and slips off to the southeast a little bit there, but it looks like it'll be east of the Pribilofs. Good VFR now over much of the interior, except down here in Bristol Bay. Probably, maybe, possibly into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, across Cook Inlet, marginal Prince William Sound, up into the Copper River Basin. Susitna Valley looks good, though, as well as eastern interior. Areas of IFR for the southeast coast. Passes Anatuvik and both Adigan tomorrow. Look for IFR flying conditions at times. And pretty good chance it'll be VFR again for Lake Clark and Merrill. In fact, it will be VFR for Lake Clark, Merrill, rainy and windy tomorrow, as well as Isabel and even Mentasta. Tanita, VFR. Portage, same forecast, at least for another day. Chilkoot and White. Starting out VFR with lowering ceilings and maybe visibilities into and throughout the afternoon toward evening. Freezing level surface here, just south of the Alaska Peninsula, up the east side of Kodiak, hugging the North Gulf Coast, cutting across the northern Panhandle. And at the surface, 2,000 feet here, right across Prince of Wales Island. And that's off the chart out here in the west, but the surface is back up to near the Pribilofs. And for icing, that big storm down to the south, that's going to be producing spreading moisture northward here from the Fox Islands all the way out to the Shimei and Attu area. So look for some isolated moderate rime with that. Above about 4,000 feet, just a slight chance up here over the northwest, nothing significant at all. And here for the central and southern Panhandle, chance of some mixed icing above roughly 6,000 feet or so. Actually, this would be maybe even a little more significant than that here over the Aleutians. And for the jet stream, we've got this upper level low that's currently bringing the widespread clouds, light snow, or areas of light snow, lower flying conditions here, and ridging out here over the Bering Sea, trough down here to the south, main jet well to the south, just clipping the southern southeast coast a little bit, but really not having that much of an effect. Again, the main jet well to the south. There are going to be some changes. This big storm out here to the west will eventually reorient the whole pattern here, and we'll start to get a southerly flow beginning tomorrow evening, actually into southern Alaska here, and that will probably progress and increase throughout the upcoming week. 9,000 feet for tomorrow. High pressure over the Russian Far East, northwest flow. Still the cold flow here coming down from the northwest, but not too strong here over the eastern interior. Easterlies 30 to as high as 55 knots here over the central Aleutians, falling back toward Shimei. Southwest 20 knots here across the Panhandle. And at 3,000 feet, pretty light winds, 5 to 15 over the southeast coast. Same thing here over the eastern central interior, 5 to 10 knot winds. And northeasterlies turn easterly, 30 to 50 knots across the central Bering Sea. Could see 60 to 65 knot winds here along the central Aleutians, Fox Islands, and 40 knots out toward Shimei, but pretty light for Kodiak Island. And for turbulence, nothing over the interior here. Auckland, Southwest Mountains here looks like could see some occasional moderate chop below 4,000 feet. Definitely here for the Aleutian chain from the Fox Islands on out to Adak. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces, undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine debris coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact, the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to to get boats, larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures. And in one sense, marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and obviously a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and global, international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity, activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had, being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, really not much in the way of any significant changes over what we had yesterday. Same thing for Cook Inlet, no changes expected for the next 2 or 3 days. And that's the same forecast out west here. Moving on, coastal water forecast there. Not too bad along the outer coastline of the Panhandle, south to southwest 10 to 20 knots, otherwise south to southeast 10 to 20 on the north coast, north 20, northern Lynn Canal, east 10 for Stevens Passage, southeast 15 Clarence Strait. And for Monday, small cloud advisories there roll into the strait there. Again, gales on the south coast in the afternoon with that pretty good storm pulling in closer off to the southwest. Otherwise, small craft advisories here for the remainder of the coastline. South 30 knots diminishing to 20 knots, but all those seas running 8 to as high as 13 feet. And for Prince William Sound, north 15 knots, seas 3 feet, without the gustiness or the strength, or without as much gusty outflow winds through the bays there. Otherwise, east 20 for the eastern North Gulf Coast, 15 on the west side, north 25 for both Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay, northeast 25 south of the Forelands, and northern Cook Inlet, northeast at 10. Call it north 15 for Monday there, northern inlet, but an increase in the winds here, northeast 30 for southern Cook Inlet, gales, Kamishak Bay, northeast 35, east 30 for the Barren Islands, and small craft advisories here for the North Gulf Coast, east-northeast winds at 25, northeast 20 for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, northwest 20 here on the east side, Shelikof Strait northeast at 25 knots, and Sitkinak to Castle Cape, east 20, Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, east 35, northeasterly gales on the Bering Sea side, Bristol Bay northeast at 30. Northeast 30 holds through Monday there with east 30 on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Big difference here on the south side. We got southerly winds 25 from Cape Sarachev all the way up to Sitkinak, then southeast 30 on the east side of Kodiak, Shelikof Strait northeast 30. And for the western Aleutians tomorrow, east to northeast 30 knots about sums it up. And then we got northeasterly gales here for Adak and Atka as that gradient tightens and that storm to the south edges northward, or the frontal boundary does. We've got storm warnings coming into the picture here, southern zones of the Fox Islands there with good gales on the north side. And then the outlook for Monday, we've got east-southeast for Unalaska Island, 35 to 40 knots. 40 to 50 knots for Umnak Island, and then north to northeast 35 to 45 here for Adak and Atka. Otherwise, no change out for the western zones. Southwest coast, northeast 25 to 30 knots. Gales for the Pribilofs out of the northeast. Small craft advisory St. Matthew Island, and 15 to 20 knot winds Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island. St. Lawrence Island pick it up to 25 knots for brisk wind advisories all the way down to Nunivak Island, where it's northeast 30 here, coming out of Kamishak Bay 40 knots out of the northeast for the Pribilofs. Gales or St. Matthew Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, kind of a light variable wind pattern there tomorrow to south at 10 for the central coast. Northwest 10 to 15 here on the west side, but a general 15 knot northwest wind for the Chukchi Sea. And for Monday, north 15 there for the southeastern Chukchi Sea, 10 knots on the western capes, and then really kind of just light and variable to no wind at all here for the remainder of the Beaufort Sea. And for tonight, that low kicks off into Canada, but southwest flow, it's going to leave a little unsettled there for the central and southern panhandle. Otherwise, no change here, both in southern Alaska, central Alaska, or in the north. And then this storm starting to bear down on the Aleutians tomorrow. You can see definitely an increase in those winds, so those storm warnings that we got out there that we just saw in the Marines with 30-knot winds out to the west, rain and snow on the increase across the entire Aleutian chain to the Alaska Peninsula, and not so much for Kodiak Island. That'll be later. Another dry day, much like today here, southern Alaska. Maybe a little less in the way of flurries here over the eastern interior areas, but that stays back to the northwest. And then for the outlook on Monday, here's that next storm coming northward here with the increasing wind and rain and the tightening gradients. Still by late afternoon, the heaviest effect down in the Queen Charlottes, but that may come northward. So bringing the gales to the south coast with increasing rain, increasing moisture along the North Gulf Coast. Warm front definitely bringing rain to Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, and stays breezy and wet from Unalaska all the way out to Adak, and a little breezier in the interior, but generally dry. Well, that's a look at the weather. Thanks so much for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.